Welcome back to React Native Radio Podcast. Brought to you by X. Not the letter, not only 17 or above can watch, the other X. The one with all the bickering. Episode 273. GlueStack Style, a performant universal styling library designed for React Native and the web.
Are you on the new social media app Threads, Mazen?
I am, and I think I just got on it because of the hype of everyone saying that they're starting to get on it. And I had to help with the whole getting to 1 million in like an hour or so.
Yeah, I mean, it's honestly not that bad. It's pretty good. It's pretty solid. It's definitely more of a MVP level software compared to, you know, Twitter that's been around for a long time. But I mean, it wasn't as bad as I thought. I'm not like a huge Instagram user. I'm not a huge Instagram fan even. It just doesn't really work with the way my mind works. I don't want to post pictures every time I want to share something. But Threads fits more the Twitter style that I'm used to. It's just the only thing about it is it's like a mixture of my Instagram crowd, which is more like real life friends who don't know anything about tech, and then my tech friends.
Yeah, it is. I think because it's porting over from Instagram, it's trying to keep that whole like personal crowd together. And you mentioned like for it being an MVP, like looking and feeling like an MVP. It seems pretty far along in that. I do like the interactions when you click to see the comments within a thread. That's pretty cool. It's a nice first iteration of like 1.0 of the app. And I think they did a very good job of getting it there, which kind of seemed like in such a short time period. Is it built in React Native? I think so. No?
So it's not in React Native. I actually downloaded the app onto my Mac because I have some tricks for doing that. And I pulled it down and I went into the package itself and like dug into the source as much as I could. And as far as I could tell, it was just a Swift app.
Interesting. Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah, it is interesting. They would probably have Android out by now if it was on React Native.
Probably. Most likely.
Well, we can't say that they didn't know about React Native. I don't know what their problem is there, but that's okay. Maybe they'll come to the light eventually. It's pretty good. It doesn't take the place of Twitter for me yet, at least. There's some cool stuff though.
Yeah.
So I guess I should get to intros. I'm Jamin Holmgren, your host, friendly CTO of Infinite Red. I live in the beautiful Pacific Northwest. Man, the weather is just amazing this time of year. July is one of the best years or best months of the year to be in the Pacific Northwest. But I live there with my wife and 4 kids. In the winter, I play recreational hockey. It's in my notes still, but I'm not doing that in the summer. And I do drive my tractor whenever I get an excuse to, which I have actually a lot of work to do. So probably going to be doing that quite a bit. I'm joined today by my grandiose co-host, Mazen. Very grandiose today. Yeah. Mazen Chami lives in Durham, North Carolina with his wife and his boy. He is a former pro soccer player and coach and is a senior React Native engineer also here at Infinite Red. We are joined today by a special guest, or rejoined, I should say, because he's been on React Native Radio, I think 3 times now, including once before Infinite Red took over React Native Radio. I think it was... I forget the episode, but you were also on React Native Radio 197. I wasn't on that episode. I was in Hawaii, which makes me think, why am I here? I feel like I should be in Hawaii.
Don't we all?
Right now. Yeah. But I stayed home from Hawaii just to talk to Sanket. So Sanket Sahu, founder and CEO of Geeky Ants. He has been doing that for, what is it now, 12 years? Something like that?
Yes.
Is that right, Sanket?
Yeah.
And Sanket's one of the interesting people that I think actually does love to code in both React Native and Flutter fairly equally, at least from what I can tell, which is hilariously cool and also, hilarious at the same time. It's just it's an unusual thing. Most times people will pick one and then just kind of roll with it, but Sanket, you're just kind of a tech nerd. You just like this stuff, don't you?
I wouldn't say that I'm like 50-50 on both. I definitely have way more interest and a bit of bias as well towards React Native. But yeah.
I think you're just saying that because of you're on the podcast.
Not really. I mean, Geeky Ants as a company, we have to kind of pick tech, and also based on the request and the community, we have to get involved with like most of the technologies that come in, be it Swift UI or something like Jetpack Compose, or maybe React Native or Universal React or even Flutter. So we have to like equally give chance to each of the technologies and then try to decide what fits best. So yeah, the good old saying of it depends. Yeah.
Well, let me ask you, how big is Geeky Ants these days?
Geeky Ants, we are right around 500 plus people.
500 people?
Wow.
Yes. Yeah.
Holy cow, Sanket. How do you manage 500 people? That's incredible.
Yeah, I think as we grew, there was a shift in terms of like when we were 50 and now we are 500. Definitely a lot of things have changed in terms of the processes that we had to bring in, or maybe even a bit of shift in the culture, while we try to stay strong to the early days of like stay curious and try to adopt new things and not to be like a lot process driven. So it's we just try to balance out things, and yeah.
I feel like when I first met you, you might have been around, I don't know, I'm just going to take a total guess. It was something like 80 or something.
That's right. Yes.
At that time.
Yeah. I think when we first met at Chain React, that was in 2016, 2015, 16, around that. Yeah. We were
2017, probably. Yeah.
Yes.
That was the first Chain React.
Yes. 17. Yeah. We were around 85, 90 people, I guess. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So a pretty close guess. Yeah. But you've grown quite a lot. Are you going to keep growing?
Yes. Yeah. I think let's see where it all goes. We have like short-term plans, not really betting on, okay, 5-year plan, we have this and we'll do that. So let's see where it all goes.
Well, I can definitely say that I knew you before you were the owner of the biggest software consulting firm in the world. So at some point you're going to get there, I'm sure. You're doing very well, Sanket. Happy to have you back on React Native Radio, and I'm sure you're a busy guy, but that you take the time for us here.
Likewise, it's all my pleasure to be speaking to you both.
Awesome. Well, I will say that this episode is sponsored by Infinite Red, which is not 500 people. We're about 30 people. We're a premier React Native design and development agency located fully remote in the US and Canada. And we just focus on React Native. We don't do everything else. Obviously, being the size we are, we have to kind of focus on one thing. So if you're looking for React Native expertise, hit us up at infinite.red/React Native. And don't forget to mention that you heard about us through Sanket's React Native Radio episode, because, we want to tell them thank you. All right, let's get to our topic for today.
Yep.
Let's start with a little bit of history. Tell us a little bit about yourself first.
So yeah, I started Geeky Ants right after my college, and I have a degree in computer science, though the history goes way back to where it all started. And I think that is common between me and Jamin, that we started with QBasic, and our and our love for like seeing things appear on the screen with code goes back to the good old time of like, say, prompts, and then getting into whole graphic thing, right? Like I remember QBasic had screen 1, screen 2 and things like that, and then you could paint pixels on low res.
I used to use screen 11 a lot because it had more colors or something. I think.
Yeah, and the resolution was like what, 320 by something 240 or something like that.
Wow.
Yeah.
320 across.
Yeah.
Like an iPhone screen, but on your whole computer monitor, like an old iPhone screen on your computer monitor. Yeah.
And I think going through that journey, painting things on the screen, be it graphics or maybe text, and making sure the interaction goes really well and the experience that the users get, that goes throughout, like from QBasic to using C and C++, and then we entered web, and it it just changed everything. Like you could do something and then share a link with anyone else and they would see what you're doing. And on top of that, JavaScript was a wonderful thing. We could animate and do things and like add interactions and not just do the boring forms, the jQuery days. And then came React in 2013-14, and it like was again a total change in what we do and how we build things, right? And React Native came in for Android, and I jumped right in when I was running Geeky Ants. We were pretty small. I think we were like 20, 25 folks back then, and we wanted to do native mobile app development. We were getting a lot of requests because we were running a web agency, and it was the obvious next thing to pick up native development too. And something like React Native was a very obvious thing. So we just jumped right in, and then we built a lot of things on top of it, realized that it needed something like a component library. And that's how Native Base came in. We built Native Base V1, which is not at all good. I mean, if you compare with the UI libraries of today, right? But we needed something like as a head start. And that's where we entered the world of open source and got a lot of exposure and got connected to a bunch of like-minded folks all around the world. And that's when our interaction happened through, I think, some webinar or some online meetup. And then we thought, okay, it should be good that we meet in person and probably do something. And I remember we had the first official work together. That was, I think, through Ignite and doing a native-based boilerplate. And that's when...
That's right.
Yeah. That's when Geeky Ants and Infinite Red collaborated for the first time. And we took it forward through conferences and then met a couple of, or 3 times, I guess, after that. Which is amazing. So yeah, so the whole journey is all mixed, how these companies at different parts of the world think alike and have like very similar journey, and we are trying to do very similar things, be it UI component library like Native Base or a starter kit or CLI like Ignite. So yeah, that's a bit about it. Yeah.
And you're based in Bangalore. Do you say Bangalore or is it Bengaluru, or how do you say that?
Yeah, we have both the names. The new name is Bengaluru, but people know it with the name Bangalore. So Bangalore is
okay.
Yeah.
And that's where you are today, right?
Yes. Yeah. I'm based out of Bangalore, and we are in a hybrid mode. Yeah, in India. Most of the people work. I mean, about half of the people work from the office, and rest of the people are remote. We are still trying to figure it out, like how do we move forward in the post-pandemic thing. But yeah, so yeah, I do attend conferences and speak at conferences too. Like just last Saturday, Friday and Saturday, we had a local conference, which was international. It was React Nexus. And yeah, so yeah, that's a bit about me.
It's incredible how you live across the planet, yet your company and Infinite Red are connected, and you and Jamin have met a couple times. It's just incredible how such an open source community has such a tight-knit community at the end of the day, regardless of where we are on the planet. That's pretty cool to me.
I agree. When I started doing open source in like 2012, I was just blown away by how, like, I remember going to a conference and walking down the street, and I was with probably, I want to say about 12 or 14 developers. And I looked around and I had met each of them and knew where they were from. There were only 2 who were from the same country.
Wow.
Myself and another American. Every other person was from a different country from each other. So like 12 different, maybe if there were 12 people, there were like, I guess 11 countries represented. And the other American at the time was walking next to the guy from Japan and speaking fluent Japanese with him. I was like, this is a very international thing. And I was not used to that at that time. Like, I'm from a backwoods, like coastal little town from Oregon. That was a very different thing for me to experience. And then over the last decade, I've gotten used to it. Like, oh yeah, of course I'm going to have a call with a guy from India. Like, big deal. I do it all the time.
Yes. Yeah. And the magic that it brings, the amount of like different perspectives, and because everybody has lived a very different life, but they are connected with this common thing. And then when you share ideas, it's just totally mind blowing.
If you hang out with Mazen, though, you get a tour of the world just from one guy, because he's Lebanese, lived in Nigeria, grew up in Nigeria, but then somehow connected to, weren't you connected to Canada somehow too? But then definitely
Columbus.
New York.
I was born in Columbus, Ohio, but went to school.
Born in Columbus, Ohio somehow, is married to
Palestinian,
a Palestinian. Yeah.
who grew up in Brooklyn. So yeah.
Right. Yeah. So you get a tour of the world just from hanging out with him.
He's a global guy, I would say.
That's right.
So Sanket, you mentioned native base. We had you on the podcast for RNR 197. I think that was with Gant and Robin, actually. That was, Geeky Ants and yourself included, intro into open source. And since then, it seems like, native base has grown a lot. But most recently, which kind of leads us into our topic for today, you're releasing GlueStack. Can you tell us a little bit about what GlueStack is and how it came about?
Totally, yeah. So before that, I talk about like the idea behind native base and where it kind of started going downhill and why we started working on GlueStack altogether. So native base is a UI component library. The V1 and V2 was meant for native platforms, Android and iOS. With V3, we got ambitious and we wanted to make it like work on web. So we made it universal, and it worked well up to an extent. But as we went on building V3, we wanted it to be a feature-rich library. And while doing that, we added a bunch of features like core styling. And on top of that, we had like a detection for iOS, Android, and web as well. We had hover state, we had pseudo state, and nested styling and whatnot. And all these things were happening on the JS runtime, which is the only option when you're doing React Native. But for web, you should ideally have like, or maybe compile it to CSS or reduce the runtime overhead somehow. After we built it and shipped it, it was not so good on our part that we didn't test it well with a lot of components render on a single page, like large landing pages. And we realized it much later that this was not very performant because it was doing a lot of things on the runtime. And that's when a lot of libraries like Stitches, like Vanilla Extract, and these CSS and JS libraries started showing up, which essentially compiles everything during the build time. So it minimizes the runtime overhead. In fact, Vanilla Extract by Mark is like, it has zero runtime overhead because it just gives you the class name. The entire TypeScript file where you define your classes, it just goes away. And all you get is .css file and class names, which straight away goes into your, say, React components, which is amazing, which is a very nice hack. You get all the best of the TypeScript world with type safety and better tooling and DX and whatnot, while when it builds, you just strip that part out. And that's the same technique being used by a bunch of other recently announced CSS and JS libraries too, something like Panda CSS. They are doing the same thing. We loved the idea, and that's when we started building the next version of Native Base. We wanted to call it Native Base V4. But there was a little bit of not so good rep as well going in and around the React Native community, that Native Base has been there for a really long time and it has its own downsides, this, that. We didn't want to get into all those. And we wanted to build it from ground up so that people have a sense that okay, this is not carrying any baggage of Native Base V3 either. That's when we thought, okay, let's rename Native Base V4 to something else. And in parallel, we also came up with another idea of building a framework, because Geeky Ants as a consultancy and a services company, we have to get started on projects quickly. We have to have like some sort of repository of most widely used features all across in the form of plugins. And that's when we came up with the idea of doing a framework. And then we thought, okay, let's do the framework. We call it GlueStack, and then have the ecosystem around it. And then we called Native Base V4 as GlueStack UI. essentially we had to split it into multiple libraries, which is GlueStack UI, GlueStack Style, and there were like more details to it in terms of architecture and how we made it more performant.
Cool. Do you mind telling us a little bit about what the core technologies were that you chose for GlueStack, and why you went down those paths, given what you learned with Native Base?
Yes. So the successor is called GlueStack UI and not really GlueStack, because GlueStack is a framework. So I'll just stick to GlueStack UI. Yeah. Okay. So Native Base was split into 3 parts. The first part is GlueStack Style, which is the styling engine, which essentially gives you the styling part. You can just have React Native styling props like, say, background color, this, that. That is GlueStack Style, the CSS and JS library, which is universal. That is shipped and maintained in a separate repository. The second one is GlueStack UI, which is a headless UI component library that adds accessibility and adds the functionality and essentially does nothing on the styling side. And the third part is actually copied to the user's project, which is the styling part. So we have a little CLI that you run to add the components of GlueStack UI in your project. So the accessibility part and functionality comes from a library called GlueStack UI, but the styling is copied to the user's project. So you get full control of like styling it the way you want it. This helps in a lot of ways. It keeps the core really thin, the styling engine and GlueStack UI, and you get like 100% flexibility and 100% control on the styling part as well. So yeah, so that's how we split this into 3 parts. And yeah, there are more details to GlueStack Style, which is the CSS and JS library, and where most of the heavy lifting of Native Base went into. And that's where most of our work went into optimizing and making it more performant.
This next section, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. Just like treat this as like quick reactions, like just quick couple liners about in response to what you think about this. For me as a React Native developer, what are the immediate benefits that I'd see in using GlueStack UI style, potentially even framework in my project?
Yes. So GlueStack Style comes with a nice Babel plugin, which optimizes your styles. So you can write it in a very CSS way with descendant styling and selectors. And also you can write states that comes with GlueStack Style. And it is highly optimized with a Babel plugin, which compiles down at build time for web and native both, which makes it really fast. So the productivity of styling goes really high, and you get web for free. So it's universal. The same thing applies for GlueStack UI as well. You get all the accessibilities. If you have ever used Radix UI on the web and built a custom combo box or a select box, you know the pain of doing it, right? So it just moves you really fast and skips all the part of building primitives, and just you can focus on building the thing. And also it comes with an optional styling, GlueStack UI. So you get the base style as well with our opinions, like what should the design system token look like, and everything in and around that. So, and everything is universal, so you get all the advantages.
Nice. Yeah? Nice. Can I build a customized UI? So my designer comes, gives me these designs. They're not familiar with GlueStack. Will I be able to build this customized UI? Most frameworks these days are very rigid. Like they kind of lock you into a format specifically. I know GlueStack might have its own opinions within like how to do the tokens, like you mentioned, and other stuff. But will I be able to build this customized UI with the designer who has no opinion, has never seen GlueStack before or worked with it?
Totally. I think that is one of the points and pain areas of Native Base too, because it comes with its own styling, which is tightly coupled with components. And here it's very open. You can delete every single token and you can just empty out the complete object and then define your own and then use those in the components that's in the project. But we give a head start so that people understand what it should look like, but you're totally free to delete everything. And the designers can come up with their own tokens that you can introduce in this and then start using it. So in terms of rigidity, we have taken extra care of making sure that you don't get locked in terms of design or in terms of token or design system altogether. Yeah, it's pretty flexible.
Okay, so I I told Mazen when we were prepping for this, we need to throw you some harder questions too. Like we can't just make this too easy for you, Sanket. So,
Totally. I love that.
It sounds too ambitious. Like you're doing too much. Like you're really taking on a lot. Where like Native Base was a little more narrowly focused. So did you have any thoughts about that? Like, did you think, oh man, we're taking on a lot here. We're trying to do a lot here. Like, do you feel like it's achievable? Have you already achieved it in your mind? Like, where are you at in that process?
Not in the mind. GlueStack UI, GlueStack style, all those things are already live. GlueStack UI is going from alpha to beta this week, and we have already used style UI in many projects. The entire, like, if you look at gluestack.io main website, it has like 5 subdomains as well, and each landing page uses GlueStack style and GlueStack UI. So the question about getting too ambitious is out of the scope of this, but there are other areas where this question does come and this concern does come. When we think about, say, building a complete two-way bound design to code, low code, no code builder sort of thing, which has some bits of AI and then does things for you. That's where it may get a bit too ambitious. Or maybe on the hosting platform that we are building for the framework. And though we have built it, I mean, the R&D and the POC version is up there with most of it.
Yeah.
Not the builder part, but the hosting platform. And so our goal is to go from idea to production that scales in like as minimum time as possible. And we see that this is the pain when we talk to enterprise companies, like really large scale companies. Every company is trying to have a standardization, bring in design system, bring in tools that help them bootstrap projects, tools that make their like local project go and deploy in like less than 5 minutes. So this problem is universal, but the meta problem here is that every company is building it for themselves and they are not really talking to each other. And this may not outlive their engineers, which is a problem. And we want to bring in a standardization so that companies can opt in for it without lock-in, and also freely, it's not person dependent. So that's the idea we are behind, and want to build tools from writing pixels to deploying on large scale monolith and edge servers, both. So, and that's where it gets like way too ambitious, the adoption and making yeah. So yeah, I agree with your point and the concern.
Yeah. Well, I know because I've tried to take on really ambitious projects before, but and with varying degrees of success. But I think it's something you like. If anybody can pull it off, I think you could. You're not afraid to dive into very complex, larger portions of open source. So the GlueStack framework in particular, it seems to simplify the process of building, obviously, modern web and mobile apps. So what are some of the complexities that it helps to eliminate, and also how does it like streamline the development process itself?
Yeah. I think that's where it all started. Like when you want to come up with an idea, for example, and then you want to, like, you're setting up your local dev environment. You try to, say, bring in a database. Maybe you'll choose something like a cloud solution, or if not, you want to do Postgres on your local machine. Then you go and check how to do that. Then you download maybe the binary, or maybe you realize, no, that's too much. You go and use the Docker image instead. And that's just for the database. And then you think about, okay, what backend should I use? Like, there are 10 options. And if I do that, how would that talk to the other services like Postgres or Redis that's running on your system? Then you set up environment variables and do a bunch of things. And this is just the backend part that I'm talking about. The front end is equally complex. The folder structure, the file system and whatnot. Every company, they have their own standard linting rules and whatnot. So idea takes a back seat in this case, and you are now struggling with a bunch of problems, which is somewhat standardized, but not very standardized as an ecosystem. And that's what we want to solve with the framework part. Like, You get a CLI, do the framework. You remember how easy it was with Laravel or maybe Ruby on Rails. You get the CLI, you clone the project, and then everything is up. Not the database part, but at least the PHP part, right? Or maybe the Ruby part. It's very straightforward, and it's a full baked framework. Though it's a monolith, you get everything out of the box. Like you want to send an email, do a cron, do a queue, or maybe you want something like a socket, you use Pusher. Though it's not an async language, PHP in itself, but you get it with other things included. You don't need to give a second thought of how you want to architect it. That experience was really nice. But the problem, obviously, the problem of monolith or the language itself or the community around it. So that's where we started thinking about having a framework that has a thin layer, but also has a lot of plugins which are like essential to development, backend, front-end services, queues, crons, emails, front-end state management, routing, and everything. Yeah, so that's the motivation and the pain where it all started, I would say. Yeah. So Jamin, I have this question, or maybe Mazen, I have this question for either of you. Maybe, yeah, like, do you relate to things like Ruby on Rails and Laravel, or these like full-blown backend and full-stack frameworks? Do you miss that in the React and React Native space?
Yeah, I do. I started when I actually got fully into development, I started on with CodeIgniter, very similar to Laravel.
I've used it.
I remember CodeIgniter. Yeah.
I loved it. I still, the other day, I ran into an old coworker, and I asked him what he's doing, and he's like, ever since we worked on CodeIgniter, I've just been doing that ever since because I love it so much. It gives me everything from A to Z. And when he said that, it kind of jogged my memory. I was like, yeah, it really gave you everything out of the box. And now it's a lot of, plug and play and all that kind of stuff. I think it's just being in a different world, right? You can't really build a mobile app with CodeIgniter, as far as I know. But yeah, I do miss it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Obviously, I did some CodeIgniter. I actually built my own framework, PHP framework back in the day called PHP Genesis. I did Ruby on Rails for a very long time. So having a full-fledged framework was really, really nice. There were ways you could accomplish things that were sort of blessed by the community and, had a lot of support. So yeah, I definitely miss that a bit.
I think the way the entire thing moved towards the big names pushing for microservices and cloud and whatnot, we lost the original monolith and the good parts of the monolith. And that's what I miss a lot.
Cool. So I want to actually shift it back to GlueStack style now. You mentioned that, you described GlueStack style as very universal and performant as a styling library. Can you share some examples on how you're achieving that universal and high performance? What are you doing under the hood to make it, I think from the website it says automatically fast. Like, what's happening to do this?
Yeah. So there are two parts. One is something that is common across web and mobile. And the second part that is totally different for both of them. Something like tokens, like if you have, say, $red.400 in NativeS v3 and all these runtime CSS and JS library that happens on the JS thread, we have totally skipped that and straight away replaces that with the actual value. And that's the most basic thing anybody would do when they're like optimizing performance in the build time for CSS and JS. The second step is like specific for web, wherein we take in the entire. So how it differs from, say, for example, styled components. Styled components, when you want to have like variants, it provides you low level utilities wherein you can check in for a prop and then write conditionals and return a style for like each of those true and falsy condition. You cannot optimize it at build time because it has JavaScript. So what Stitches did and what even we are doing with GlueStack style is the second object that you pass the entire definition of CSS that has to be statically resolvable. And so we have variants as a feature in GlueStack style. We have compound variants as a feature in GlueStack style. And all these states like hover and all those parts, media queries. So these are available features, and they have a writing, like some rules against how you write it, which is very similar to how CSS and JS libraries do. So the learning curve, we don't have much, but this can be totally resolved into a CSS declaration block for web. So this entire object, we take it, convert it to a proper CSS string with even the key and the definition and the actual styles that it would take. And we just store that key in the JavaScript object in React. We just pass in that, and it just on fly, it applies that. And then comes the complex part where we have states, for example. So that is handled on the JS layer. When the mouse goes in, it attaches the second definition sequentially. And then we have to deal with a bunch of CSS precedents and how all these things are applied. So if you have just one class name in the selector part, everything gets the same weightage and precedence, but the way you add it in your style block, it gets the precedence like that. So the lowest one gets the highest precedence, something like that. So we had to deal with a bunch of those things as well. Media query is very different when you talk about CSS versus React Native, because it has to be JS runtime on React Native, measure the window and do all those things. But on web, it was supposed to be SSR enabled too. That has to go from Next.js. Otherwise, you start getting flickering if you leave that to the JS thread. So a bunch of things, like whatever CSS and JS universal library should have, we have tried to get all the edge cases sorted and try to optimize it as much as possible. Though there are extra work still pending. I mean, optimizing performance is an ever evolving job. You cannot be satisfied with it.
Yeah.
But we would love to probably do builder plugin, something like Panda CSS or Vanilla Extract, so that we actually ship .css file. Right now, the entire CSS string stays in the JS file itself, which is again good and bad. But yeah, we would love to like go to the next level and do all those optimizations too.
Cool. Well, I think the best way to kind of wrap this up is by asking the Robin special at the end. What sucks about BlueStack? I don't know how that got attached to Robin, but it's been a Robin.
we blame her for that.
Yeah. What's something that can be improved on GlueStack moving forward? GlueStack UI or style?
Yeah. So for both the things, we have tried our best to make it like close to what anybody would like, how we would like to use in projects. But as I said, like BlueStack style, it can have a bundler plugin, one for Webpack, SWC, and Vite to like maybe compile it to .css file and give that to the users. That's one of the things that I can think of. Bundle size is another thing that we are working on. We have optimized it to 14 KB right now, but we want to make it like,
that's not bad.
Yeah. So we want to like reduce it further. Yeah. Let's see. We have got like, though the landing page of gluestack.io didn't have a lot of content, but a random test did show like 100 Lighthouse score. So we're pretty happy with that.
That's awesome.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Sanket. I think that there's a lot more that we could ask you about GlueStack, but honestly, I just want to go try it out.
Yeah, sure.
Where do people go to find GlueStack style and UI?
So you can head to gluestack.io and you get like the entire ecosystem, different blocks. You can click on GlueStack style and GlueStack UI and framework. So try it out. I would love your feedback, how it goes into like projects at Infinite Red, maybe.
Yeah, that'd be a lot of fun. We do get, I mean, these days we get more people asking for, like cross-platform, not just iOS and Android, but also web and other platforms. Actually, really quick, do you plan to support other platforms? Would you actually support like React Native Mac OS and TV OS and whatnot?
If React Native Core JS thing works, it'll just work out of the box. But if
it'll just work. Yeah,
it'll just work. But special cases, we may or may not. Depends on the use case.
Yeah.
And yeah,
it makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool. Well, thanks so much, Sanket. Really appreciate you coming on and talking about that. Where can people find you online?
Yeah, I'm available as Sanket Sahu and on most of the platforms.
Perfect.
Find me as Sanket Sahu on Threads, Twitter, Blue Sky.
You're on Threads as well. Okay. Very cool.
Yeah, it was lovely speaking to both of you, and we should catch up maybe even offline.
I'd love that. You can find me at Jamin Holmgren on Twitter and Threads and GitHub and everywhere else at Jamin Holmgren. You can also find Mazen at Mazen Chami, also on Threads and Twitter and everywhere. You can find React Native Radio only on Twitter at React Native RDIO. As always, thanks to our producer and editor, Todd Worth, our assistant editor and episode release coordinator, Jed Bartoski, our designer, Justin Husky, and our guest coordinator, Derek Greenberg. Thanks to our sponsor, Infinite Red. Check us out at infinite.red/React Native. And thank you for listening to us today, for hanging out with me, Mazen, and Sanket. We really appreciate it. Make sure to subscribe and maybe send this to a friend, and hopefully they like it and subscribe as well. We don't have Robin for the mom joke, but Mazen, do you have a mom joke to take us out?
I do. This one is brought to you by Darren Wilson here at IR.
Okay.
A photon checks into the hotel. The clerk asks, "Do you have any luggage?" "No," says the photon. "I'm traveling light." Todd needs to add like a laugh track or like drums at the end.
I know, right?
That needs
Like
to
add
happen.
a laugh track. Yeah.
That was
I have a
pretty good.
question. If Mazen does a mom joke, is that a dad joke?
Is it a dad joke? Well, it came from Darren and he's a dad, so we'll call it a
Yeah.
dad joke. All right. We'll see you all next time.
All right. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.